tell people this is my almost certain de rigueur, as they say. If you're going to do research in West Virginia, about West Virginia, you got to go to Richmond. There's no way. You can't escape it. You've got to go to the state archives in Richmond. You can't get around it. You've got to make a trip down there at least one time, or maybe even more than one time. The people down there are pretty helpful. And there's a lot of information. There's a lot of old newspapers from the antebellum era and Civil War era. A lot of the newspapers in that area reported stuff that was going on in what is now West Virginia, because that was the bigger city. Richmond was the big city. There were no, Charleston wasn't even the state capital at that time. We weren't a state. So any newspaper articles or anything of major importance, or even little bits and pieces, went to the Richmond Examiner. That's the big newspaper that was in Richmond during the Civil War. So if you want to go down there, check your newspapers.
Does storage become a problem for places?
It does. It does become a problem.
You think about newspapers from Civil War.
A lot of their newspapers, most of their newspapers are on microfilm.
Okay.
And it can become a problem. A lot of places, I've read places where people are complaining that they don't have room for this and they don't have room for that, and they want to get rid of this and they want to get rid of that. And, don't get rid of it. I mean, if you can help it, don't get rid of it. I mean, you don't know what's out there that might give you a clue to something. It might be a store register, where somebody went to a grocery store and they kept records, and these were the names of the people that did business with them, and they're their bills. You might find somebody on something like that. Now, one example, I was told this by Pauline Haggett. She said there's a woman that owns all the old records from Collins Funeral Home, which was a big funeral home in Thurman, for years, and she will not let anybody copy them or do anything with them.
I saw that listed. They were also had a location in Glen Jean also.
Yeah, they had one in Thurman and one in Glen Jean. It was the biggest funeral home in the Fayette County area at that time.
What was the name of the funeral home?
Collins Funeral Home.
Collins?
Like
Funeral
Collins High School.
Darrell, what would the woman's purpose be in not letting anybody copy it? I mean, I could see keeping it.
Selfishness.
I had another
Right.
another thing happened when I was working here. A young lady that used to do reenactments, and one of her ancestors had written, one of John Ward Daniel, who was a Civil War general, had written a lot about one of her ancestors, and it was in a microfilm. And she came in here and I said, they told me you couldn't copy anything off this microfilm. And I walked out of the heritage room, that's when we had all this stuff, and I said, but I don't see everything that's on this. I can't, watch everything. And I thought to myself, if it's about her ancestor, why are they going to prevent her from copying it? That's ridiculous. So I walked out and told her, I said, I don't know what goes on. I said, I don't see everything. So she copied what she needed, and I sent it back. Why in the world did you prevent somebody from doing something like that?
Because if your interest is in preserving and passing it down for future generations, the more hands it's in, the better, I would think.
Well, what they told me, and when I was working on this book, which I don't know whether I'll ever finish or not, but our goal was to get the names or pictures of tombstones of Union soldiers who died or killed in Fayette County during the Civil War. I was told I couldn't do it. That was private. That you can't do that without permission from the relatives, so to speak. And I said, how do you know they had any relatives? They were killed in the Civil War. I said, they might not even have any relatives left existing. And so, you know what I had to do? I had to write to Senator Rockefeller, to the head of, he was at that time head of Veterans Affairs, and get a letter from him giving me permission to go to these cemeteries and take pictures of these soldiers' graves, which is ridiculous. I mean, these guys have been dead for almost 150 years. I'm sure they're going to have some relatives around, but I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't know how to track them down. Be sure to, I'm on Facebook, and you can send me suggestions of any programs you think we should do. I'd like to continue this throughout the summer. And I'd like to do maybe 3 or 4 more sessions before we end it. I'm pleased at the turnout. I'm glad, I hope everybody got something out of it, at least a little bit anyway.
When